Hello and welcome back to Office Hours Live. Where's the shouting? Where's the excitement?
Woohoo!
Well, granted, there's not quite the same mood that we had before the election. This is Office Hours Live until Donald Trump closes us down, at least. What I thought we'd talk about today are two things. Number one, his appointments, and number two, this whole issue that he has created, this false issue about voting fraud in order to cover up other things and to distract attention from other things. First of all, let's talk very, very quickly about his picks for his cabinet, and his picks are likely to be going through because it's a Republican Senate after all. Tom Price for Health and Human Services, and Tom Price we know a little bit about. He is somebody who basically doesn't like, and he's from Congress, he's basically a Republican, very conservative. He does not like subsidized health care, and he will lead the charge against subsidized health care. For education, Betsy DeVos, and what do we know about Betsy DeVos? Well, she is leading the charge and has been leading the charge for years against public schools, likes public support, that is taxpayer support for charter schools and for religious schools. We have Attorney General Jeff Sessions. That's the pick. What do we know about Jeff Sessions? Well, we know that immigration, once when he was nominated, even when the Republicans were in the majority in the Senate for a judgeship, he was denied that judgeship because of racism, things that he had said in the past, showing racism and done in the past. And considering, here are the people that Trump is considering for Secretary of State Rudy Giuliani, and he's also considering Mitt Romney. Although honestly, Mitt Romney, I believe, is not being considered. I think Mitt Romney in this reality TV show called it's not The Apprentice, but it's just like The Apprentice. It's called Who Am I Going to Pick? Mitt Romney is being held out for public humiliation. I mean, this is really a humiliation ritual. This is Donald Trump's way of getting even with Mitt Romney for all the terrible things Mitt Romney said about Donald Trump during the campaign. So he's hanging Mitt Romney out to dry in public, making Mitt Romney come and beg and kiss his ring, and he's going to say, as he did in the Apprentice reality TV show, Mitt Romney, you're fired. And then for Secretary of HUD, Ben Carson. What do we know about Ben Carson? Well, Ben Carson we know because he was a candidate during the election. The interesting thing about these picks, here for Health and Human Services, somebody who does not believe in any kind of subsidized public health. For education, somebody who does not believe in public education. For Attorney General, somebody who does not believe in the Voting Rights Act. For Secretary of State, Giuliani, who is the most undiplomatic person in America. For HUD, Ben Carson, who does not believe in the Fair Housing Act. So in other words, we've got a cast of characters who are exactly opposite what they should be representing in terms of our government. Which gets us to Hillary Clinton's popular lead in the voting. It still is going up. She is now leading, and believe it or not, these votes are still coming in. She is leading Donald Trump by 2,332,814 votes. Popular votes. Now, you understand, the Electoral College is over here, and the popular vote is over here. We need to get rid of the Electoral College. We can talk about that later. But a number of votes, this 2,332,814, is 5 times the number that Gore had in his lead over George W. Bush in the year 2000. 5 times. I mean, this is not a small number. This is a huge number. It's rattling Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't like to lose. And he is, in terms of the popular vote, losing big time. This is getting up to almost 2% of the total vote in the United States election in 2016. It's now 1.7% of all voters. This is the largest percentage of popular vote going one way and the Electoral College going the other way since 1867. I mean, this is a huge, huge vindication of Hillary Clinton, a huge kind of negative response to Donald Trump, the so-called president-elect. We've got to get orange for his hair because it's still orange. And Donald Trump doesn't like the fact, presumably, that he is losing so badly. I mean, this is a man who is not a loser. He doesn't want to be a loser. He's vindictive, thin-skinned. He just hates losing. And so what is Trump's reaction to this extraordinary and increasing number? Well, he's trying to distract us. He said, and he put out a tweet recently, he said that there's massive voter fraud in 3 states that went to Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College. That is, in Virginia, he says massive voter fraud in New Hampshire. Now, there's no evidence, by the way, of any voter fraud. This is the President-elect of the United States alleging massive voter fraud when there is absolutely zilch, no evidence. As had been very clear, the major media have said it. In fact, CNN has provided all of the basis for finding that there is no evidence. And so what is Trump doing with regard to CNN? He, last night and early this morning, he let out with a whole stream of vindictive tweets against CNN. And a lot of these tweets were retweets from other people. I mean, people out there who just had negative things to say about CNN. But Donald Trump used his 12 million followers on Twitter to actually get the retweets, which he knew would actually be played up, by the media. And you see what he's doing? This is important to understand. Donald Trump, not only does he doesn't like criticism, and he doesn't want criticism in the media, he wants to discredit the media. He wants his own system through tweeting, through Twitter, of reaching the public and telling lies, such as massive voter fraud in 3 states that went for Hillary Clinton. This is the technique of people who, in the past, and we know in the 20th century, there have been dictators and despots and fascists and other people who come to power. One of the ways they come to power, one of the ways they entrench themselves in power, is that they discredit or otherwise close the popular press, the media, the free independent media, and come up with their own direct ways. They have giant rallies. They have their own ways of communicating with the public. This is dangerous, folks. This is the President-elect of the United States. It's one thing, and it was bad enough when he was a candidate for president. He is now President-elect of the United States, and he is doing this. He also wants to distract our attention from these huge and massive conflicts of interest, conflicts of financial interest, because he's got hotels and he's got resorts and he's got properties all over the world, and as president, he will be making decisions on foreign policy that have direct impact upon the value of his holdings all over the world. That is what's called a conflict of interest. And not only is it a conflict of interest, and we don't even know, because he hasn't released his tax returns, exactly how big that conflict of interest is. We know it's very, very large. But we do also know that there is something called Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution that forbids office holders in the United States, including the President of the United States, from getting any foreign benefits from foreign officials, from foreign governments. Well, what happens when he has all of these holdings around the world and he's making decisions as the commander-in-chief and as the person who is in charge of American diplomatic policy that are going to affect the profitability of all of these holdings around the world? Isn't that potentially a violation of Article 1, Section 9? And even if it's not, the ethics officers, both in the Obama administration, but also from the George W. Bush administration, the chief ethics officer in the George W. Bush administration said that this is wrong. This is ethically wrong. That the electors who are going to be making their final balloting, a pro forma usually, on December 19th, should not be electing this man, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, if he does not put all of these holdings into a blind trust, which he says he is not going to do. So you see how all of this fits together. Hillary's lead keeps on increasing. Donald Trump doesn't want anybody to pay attention to this. He's distracting us with this false news about his own, what he is saying is giant voting fraud, which there is no existence and no evidence for. And at the same time, he is doing that through tweets and establishing his own system of tweeting to the public. He's distracting our attention from his huge financial conflicts of interest. He's also distracting attention from the fact that there are recounts likely to be occurring already in Wisconsin, likely to occur in 2 other states, where there really is a very tiny margin of popular vote that went for Donald Trump, and therefore electoral vote that went for Donald Trump. And he doesn't like that, of course. So we have a man who is President-elect of the United States doing all of this, refusing to acknowledge conflicts of interest, refusing to put his assets around the world in any kind of a blind trust, using his own Twitter account to undermine the public's confidence in the free press, and lying. You ready for some questions? All right, your questions. Where are they? Do we have any questions? Yes, we do. We have Tammy Boxworth. Tammy, doesn't supporting the recount give credence to Trump's lies about voter fraud? I'm worried about further undermining faith in our election system. Tammy, if there is reasonable grounds for a recount, and this is the same as what happened in 2000 with Florida, if there are any reasonable grounds for a recount, we should have a recount. This is not undermining voter confidence in our system. In fact, if anything, the purpose of this recount in Wisconsin and also Michigan and Pennsylvania is to confirm voter confidence. Otherwise, people might be wondering, is it possible that there was hacking? Is it possible that there was Russian hacking? Next question. Maxwell House. Well, that's a lovely name, Maxwell. I wonder why you were named Maxwell House. Robert, thank you for speaking. What media do you trust? Are there certain channels or websites that you feel give a good, relatively unbiased view? Maxwell, I tend to read broadly. I tend to read conservative and liberal. One thing I start with every day is the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, because I think that's a pretty good balance. I also read The Economist, which trends slightly to right of center, but that's okay too. I don't go trolling for information on social media because I just don't have confidence. I don't go anywhere where I really don't have confidence. And of course, you need to have confidence with regard to where you go as well. Paolo Lim, how does the loss of so many races by Democrats these past 2 years compare to their losing streak between 1868 and 1928? Paolo, you expect me to be a historian. Well, I'll try to be. Is it harder to win back power now than it was back then? Paolo, yes, it is. Because right now, when you get entrenched political systems as we do, and the Republicans have a lot of entrenched power, they have at the state level a great deal of power through gerrymandering of these congressional districts. They also have a huge amount of power now in the Senate because they are going to be able to confirm Donald Trump's picks for the Supreme Court. And that Supreme Court is going to have huge power, as you know, because Citizens United and other cases over the effect of money in politics. Marcy Wright, White. I am so sick with worry. Marcy, I understand. I don't want you to worry, all right? We've been through harder times as a country, but it is important that we not get in denial and normalize what's going on. This is not normal. Anyway, Marcy, you say, I'm so sick with worry. How are we going to keep our Social Security and Medicare? Marcy, the way to do this, and I think this could be the Republicans and Trump's Waterloo. You understand that historic reference? Napoleon met his Waterloo. Because what Paul Ryan, as Speaker of the House, wants to do, and he's wanted to do it for years, and he's got a lot of the Senate Republicans behind him, and now Donald Trump is talking about doing the same thing, is to turn Medicaid into a block grant to the states and turn Medicare into a voucher program so you can buy your Medicare from private insurers. The problem there is that people who are sicker are going to be charged much, much more by the private insurers than people who are not. This is a backward way of basically ending, not only ending, but eroding Medicare. And at the same time getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. 20 million people will lose their insurance. But I think this is a Waterloo moment, or potential Waterloo moment, Marcy, because so many people like you depend on their Medicare. They depend on their Social Security. So let's just hope that Republicans fall into that trap. Joyce Morin, we're all sideswiped and a bit lost since the election. I'm feeling myself getting more and more complacent and feeling plain defeated. Some wisdom, direction, and focus would be great. Joyce, first of all, I understand completely why you might be feeling defeated and basically cynical. Let me just urge you, Joyce, and everybody else who is watching, to, when you get up in the morning and you're feeling defeated, or you're feeling cynical, or you're trying to put Donald Trump and what's happening in the American political system out of your head, and I urge you to try to do that in the morning, especially when you're waking up. Just think about good things. Think about your family. Do exercises. But at some point during the day, I want you to be filled with resolve. Because the only way we are going to get our country back in the year 2020, in the presidential election, but also in the midterm election of 2018, in terms of the House and even possibly the Senate, is if you are filled with that spirit of resolve. You are more engaged than you ever have been. You are determined, and you and millions of other Americans are determined to take the country back. Remember what I said about Hillary Clinton's lead. I mean, she is leading by 2.3 million in the popular vote. Don't believe that Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters represent a majority of this country. About half of the people who were eligible to vote voted. And half of them voted for Donald Trump. That's only about 25% of the voting eligible public. And most of the people who voted for Donald Trump, I don't believe, actually approve of Donald Trump's racism and his xenophobia. I think many of them were just fed up with the system, fed up with what they perceived to be a corrupt system, and they kind of held their nose and they voted for Donald Trump. So the number of people in America who are supporting Donald Trump's vision of America, I think it's very, very small. So the vast majority of Americans don't want this. They don't want this kind of country. Joyce? Oh, sorry, Saul Hammond. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. How's that a situation? Is there precedent in imposing this injunction? What's the timeline for resolve on this? And is there anything we can do to influence the outcome? Saul, for those of you who haven't been following this, the Labor Department changed the rule with regard to overtime and brought it up to date. And I'm very, very pleased And I am very, very positive about what the Obama's Labor Department did. I used to be Secretary of Labor. I know how hard it is to do these things in the face of a great deal of corporate resistance. But what they did is they brought the overtime rules up to date, so a lot more people, millions more people, are entitled to time and a half for working over 40 hours a week. And a judge granted an injunction to stay that rule. There were a lot of business groups that said that rule is not statutorily justifiable under the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. And that judge has basically brought to a halt and prevented those millions of people from getting a raise. And the sad and despicable aspect of all of this is that that will not be relitigated, I don't think, by Donald Trump's Justice Department. Can you imagine Jeff Sessions, conservative, right-wing Jeff Sessions, as Attorney General, litigating this? All right, Jan Woods. How can President Obama help Native Americans at Standing Rock to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline? What can the American people do to encourage him to enforce the law before he leaves office? Jan, there is no substitute for writing, calling the White House, but actually letters are better than calling. And you just say, this is your opportunity, your last opportunity, President Obama. You get the Army Corps of Engineers to change its rule. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe and other tribes have a right under treaties, and also they have a right to clean water. They have a right to have their own ancestral grounds protected. And this pipeline needs to be stopped. And you can say, President Obama, this is in your power. We will not have the power soon. Do this now. Jason Roberts. Suburban white college grads usually vote Republican. Working class voters usually vote Democrat, but it's the reverse this year. It was the reverse this year. Does this signal a permanent realignment? Jason, I think the real issue here is fundamentally a populist revolution. We saw on the left, as it were, Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders, the most unlikely candidate, 22 states. And in the Democratic primary. And then we have Donald Trump, right-wing authoritarian populism. The real issue in the future, and I've said this before, and I hope people remember this, the real issue in the future is which kind of populism, authoritarian, right-wing, anti-democratic populism, or fundamental reform, progressive populism, we're going to adopt, because we cannot go any longer in the direction we have been going with an establishment. That is big business, large corporations, Wall Street, very wealthy people running our government. I mean, that's where the left and right populists come together, because we don't want crony capitalism, we don't want corporate welfare, we don't want the kind of money, big money running our country. That's the one kernel of truth in terms of right-wing populism. The problem is authoritarian populism comes with a lot of negative aspects, as we've just been talking about. Roger Pariseau, does this election cost the middle class more than the Bush years cost the middle class? Roger, it's certainly that potential. If you look at the tax cut that Donald Trump is preparing for the wealthiest Americans and for corporations, it is much larger than the George W. Bush tax cut. Trickle-down economics, which is a cruel hoax, is going to be tested in a much larger way and found to be another cruel hoax after the Republican Congress agrees to cut taxes dramatically on the top 1%. I mean, we're going to have people who are earning, on average, over $3 million a year. Their tax cut is going to be equal to over $1.2 million a year. Can you imagine? We've never seen a tax cut that large. And then if you add to that all of the deregulation in terms of environmental deregulation, health and safety deregulation that Trump is talking about, getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, getting rid of even the Dodd-Frank Regulatory Act, which was supposedly going to restrain or trying to restrain Wall Street. If you add all of that together, what you see is widening inequality to an extent we haven't seen in this country for years, even though inequality has been widening. We're going to have much, much wider inequality. This is our last. I hope this has been an upbeat. Have you felt stimulated and excited and rededicated? I mean, it's easy to be upset about what's going on. But I don't want you to, like Joyce, the person who said she was just feeling cynical. I don't want you to feel cynical. Candace Langford, can we call this something other than resistance? I think there will need to be elements of that, but I also think we do need a positive message and goals. Candace, I agree with you. I think the first response to what is about to happen after January 20th does have to be a peaceful resistance, because you've got Donald Trump and you've got the Republicans, and you have essentially a first 100-day agenda, which they're going to steamroll through. I don't think we will even be able to stop it, but I think that we can do everything we have in our power to fortify the Democrats in Congress, to slow things down, to give complete to reveal what's going on, to reveal the downsides of all of the candidates, including Supreme Court candidates. So a peaceful resistance. But beyond that, you're absolutely right. We have got to hold on to our progressive ideas in terms of getting big money out of politics, as I said a moment ago, but also trying to move toward a single-payer healthcare system, trying to move forward toward tuition-free public education, trying to move forward to a system of equal opportunity for people, and against the militarization of our police, against mass incarceration, against the kind of hatefulness that we have seen legitimized by Donald Trump. So I want to just say a couple of things. First of all, today is Giving Tuesday. And by the way, I want to thank so many of you who have given us, actually enabled us to continue our videos, do a lot of what we do on this Facebook page. We've got $40,000 so far. In 36 hours, our goal is $100,000. It's amazing. 35% of this money has come from California, and then Washington and New York and Massachusetts, Illinois. A lot of love has come from Texas. Texas, thank you so much. 34 donations, and in fact, 25% of our total donations so far. And I'm talking about donations that enable us to continue to provide you with our videos and all of the other things and the information we are trying to provide you. 25% have come from red states, Trump states. And it's not just that. We even have, some of you have been donating from Austria and Canada and Costa Rica, Denmark, Germany, Hong Kong. It's just, but we don't have anybody yet from North Dakota. That's the only place, that's the only state. We don't have any contributions yet from North Carolina. So if you want to contribute, please go to Inequality Media, inequalitymedia.org. And please sign up and please donate. I want to thank some people here who have done just wonderful, wonderful work. And Zoe Umlaut Beck and Jobin Gill are just great. They're here right in my office helping with all of this. And today we also have Sam Martz, Samantha. Samantha, do you like Samantha or Sam?
Either one.
Either one, who's done wonderful work and is part of our team. And to all of you, I want to say again, be aware, be vigilant, but don't give up hope. Don't be cynical. Become more engaged, more involved, more outraged. Get beyond outrage and go to action. See you next week.